The chains around my wrists cut deeper every time the ship shifted, and somewhere above me, an alarm kept blinking red without ever making a sound. I did not know if that was worse than an actual siren. Silence on an enemy warship feels like a held breath, like something about to snap. My name is Ethan Cole, and 3 days earlier, I had been a translator on a diplomatic shuttle that never should have crossed into Vulpine territory. Now, I was kneeling on the deck of a warship called Syndra's Fang, waiting to find out if I would live long enough to see another sunrise, human or otherwise. The door hissed open and she walked in. Commander Veska Thren moved like something built for war and nothing else. Tall, lean, covered in short russet fur, with ears that never stopped turning, always listening, always calculating. Her eyes were a pale amber that seemed to measure me the way a soldier measures a threat, not a person. She crouched in front of me to check the restraints, her claws brushing against the metal cuffs, and then I heard it. A low sound, deep in her chest, like an engine idling far away. She froze. Her ears went flat against her skull. "That was nothing," she said sharply, in the clipped trade language her people used with prisoners. "A vibration in the deck plating." I said nothing back. I had already learned, in 3 days of captivity, that silence was often the safest answer. She left without another word, and I spent the rest of that night wondering what I had just heard, and why it had frightened her more than anything else on that ship. I found out from one of the ship's translator drones, a small hovering unit that had been assigned to monitor my behavior and occasionally answer harmless questions. It told me, in its flat mechanical voice, that Vulpine officers underwent something called the quieting when they were very young, a procedure that burned away certain instinctive reactions, the tail thump of excitement, the yip of surprise, and the purr, the oldest and most dangerous of them all, because a purr meant only one thing among her people. It meant trust, it meant safety, it meant lowering every guard a soldier was trained to keep, raised for life. Commander Thren had gone through the quieting at 4 years old, top of her class, not a single tremor since. That is what the drone told me. Until now. 9 days into my capture, the ship's coolant system failed in engineering, and I heard the emergency call ripple through the corridors before anyone explained what was happening. 4 crew members were trapped near a bay that was about to fill with scalding vapor. I knew the design of that coolant system. I had studied similar Vulpine engineering schematics back when I still believed diplomacy might end this war before it started. I did not think about being a prisoner. I only thought about the 4 people who were about to die because of a valve nobody had time to reach. I shouted instructions through the drone, fast, precise, telling the closest engineer exactly which line to seal and in what order. My hands were still chained, so I could not do it myself, only guide someone else through it, while my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. The leak sealed with seconds to spare. The warning lights on the monitor shifted from red to amber to green. Commander Thren stood over me the entire time, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When the last light turned green, she let out a slow breath. And there it was again, that same low hum, rolling up from somewhere deep inside her chest, quieter this time, but unmistakable. "Commander," I started. "Do not," she said quickly. I wasn't going to say anything. You were already forming the words. I raised both hands as far as the chains allowed. No commentary. Just an observation. Your ship makes a strange noise sometimes. Her tail, which she always kept wrapped tightly around her boots like a coiled rope, twitched once before going still again, as if she had caught it misbehaving and yanked it back into obedience. Over the following days, something between us began to shift, though neither of us said it out loud. She started asking questions that had nothing to do with military strategy. What it felt like to be afraid, and still choose to help someone. Why humans laughed when they were nervous instead of hiding it. Why I had said thank you to a machine that could not even understand gratitude. I told her the truth, because lying to someone who could smell fear seemed like a losing game. I told her that humans did not see feeling things as a weakness. We saw it as the whole reason we bothered surviving at all. Fear kept us alive, laughter kept us sane. Trust, even dangerous trust, was what let 2 strangers on opposite sides of a war sit in the same room without trying to kill each other. She listened without interrupting, which for a commander of her rank was its own kind of rare gift. On the 16th day, I told her plainly that I thought she was lonely in a way her entire species had been trained never to notice. I expected anger. Instead, she went very still, and stillness, I had learned by then, was far more dangerous with her than shouting ever was. "You should be careful," she said, suggesting an officer of the Dominion is broken. I did not say broken, I answered. I said lonely. It is a different kind of malfunction. She did not purr that time. She simply stared at me for a long moment, before turning and walking away, her spine straighter than I had ever seen it. 6 days later, they brought me to a chamber I had not seen before, dark and cold, lined with rows of silent officers seated in judgment. This was not a court in the way my people understood the word. It was a ritual, a test, designed to prove whether their rising young commander had let an enemy get too close. I stood in the center of that chamber in chains, watching Veska Thren take her place on the raised dais among the other officers. Her back was so straight it looked painful. A political officer with cold gray eyes addressed her directly. "State his function aboard this vessel. State whether the prisoner holds any value." She looked at me. I remember thinking, in that moment, that whatever she said next, I would understand it. I was not owed rescue. I was not owed mercy from people my own species had been fighting for 6 years. "He has engineering value," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber without a single crack. "Translation value." She paused, and her ears flattened slightly, the closest thing to armor she had left to hide behind. "And he restored function to Coolant Bay 3, at risk to his own safety, saving 4 crew members. This vessel's protocols had already marked as expendable." The room went cold in the particular way a room goes cold when someone says a true thing that was never supposed to be spoken aloud. Then I felt it before I heard it, a vibration that seemed to travel across the entire chamber like the ringing of a struck bell. She was purring, openly, in front of the political officer, in front of every soldier under her command, in front of the enemy she had been ordered to condemn. She did not apologize for it. She simply let it happen, chin raised, eyes locked on mine, as though she had finally decided to stop being ashamed of the sound her own body made when it recognized someone worth trusting. The political officer said nothing for a long time. Then, quietly, he dismissed the chamber, and the other officers filed out in silence that felt heavier than any shouted argument could have been. Guards led me down the corridor afterward, a respectful distance behind Commander Thren, who walked beside me, instead of ahead of me, for the first time since I had come aboard her ship. When we reached a quieter passage, she stopped and leaned close enough that I could still feel the last traces of that hum against the air between us. "You are not supposed to hear me purr," she whispered. "No one is supposed to hear that." "I know," I said. "I could have you silenced for it." "That would be the correct order, by every rule I was trained to follow." "You could," I agreed. Her hand closed briefly around my cuffed wrist. It was not gentle, not in the way my own people understood gentleness, but it was careful, the way someone holds something they have decided they do not want to see broken. "I find," she said slowly, "that I no longer wish to be quiet." Behind her, for the first time since I had been dragged onto that ship, I watched her tail uncoil from around her boot and hang loose and easy at her side, undisciplined, unguarded, the most unguarded thing I had ever seen her do. 3 weeks later, the war between our two peoples ended, not with a final battle, but with a quiet meeting arranged by a Vulpine commander who had chosen to stop hiding what she felt, and a human prisoner who had never learned how to stop feeling things loudly in the first place. Historians would later argue about which side won that war. I only remember that somewhere on a warship called Sindre's Fang, 2 very different kinds of soldiers had discovered they were not so different after all, and that trust, once heard, can never truly be silenced again.